before even going to a point of price and advocating any solutions, ask yourself a question. Do you know the problem they're trying to solve? Do you know the impact that problem will help them achieve? And do you know the outcome that they're looking to achieve? If you can't answer those three questions, you're pricing too early and it's completely irrelevant.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the smart relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and my mission is to help your company win more business at higher prices. Today, our guest is Luigi Prestinenzi, and here are 3 things you want to know about Luigi before we start. He has been in sales his entire career. At least that's what his LinkedIn page says. In 2014, he co-founded the Sales IQ Group, which I can't wait to hear about. And he also hosts the Sales IQ podcast. And by the way, he is a cancer survivor from age 21. Wow, that's impressive. And he looks to be about 82. Now, okay, maybe 40. Welcome, Luigi.
Thanks, Mark. That's a nice introduction. So thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah. Hey, I always ask, how did you get into pricing? And you aren't. So how did you get into sales?
Well, I'm pretty lucky. I fell into sales at an early age because I can't do anything with my hands. I'm not very technically gifted. And so, yeah, I'm really lucky that, during school, I used to hustle, make money, find ways to make money. But then I got my first kind of real sales job at 17. And then the rest is history.
The story you're telling reminds me of my best friend growing up, right? Where he wasn't overly technical, mathematical, et cetera, but oh my God, he was so gifted with his mouth, right? He could build relationships and he became a great salesperson. So.
Yeah, I didn't do very well at school. The whole school type of concept for me, I just struggled with. But working in sales, constructing deals, building rapport with people, I found my space. And, I've obviously been through some highs and lows through the career, but it's been probably the best experience of my life.
Yeah, I'm jealous. That is a skill I do not have. I'm happy being by myself. So first, let's start with, what is Sales IQ Group? Tell us what that is, how that works, what you guys do.
Yeah, so we essentially we serve sellers to help them be the best they can be. And what do I mean by that? So essentially, we work with organizations in helping them enable their sales team to create more quality opportunity pipeline. So in a world where sellers are really struggling to generate enough pipeline, just to generate enough opportunities for themselves, inbound marketing doesn't keep you fed 100% of the time. If you're a seller, you have to be out there generating pipeline. But how do you do it? And so we work with organizations in really enabling their people to understand who their target market is, how to create the right message, and then how to implement an outreach process that brings their buyers into the funnel. Through all of that, there's other things that we do, go-to-market planning, building sales processes, playbooks, but fundamentally it's designed to do that one thing, help sellers create more pipeline and close more deals. So we teach them the art of that process.
Nice. So it reminds me of a section that I put in the new book that's coming out, Selling Value. And one of the things that we do is we think about what customers get value. And so which customers or which market segment or which cohort, however we want to phrase that, gets the most value from our products. And then how do we go after that segment? So are you doing something like that in your education?
Yeah, so we cover what's called an ICP, which is an ideal customer profile. And we help sellers really think about, well, what part of the TAM, the total addressable market, is the right part of the market for them to engage with. I'm talking to we're training a really large professional services firm. They've got accountants, M&A advisors, etc. And when you ask them sort of who's your ICP, they're like family business. Like, well, no, that's not an ICP. That's very wide. You could have a family business doing $1 million. You could have a family business doing $1 billion, right? What are the makeup? What's the attributes of that family business that has a higher propensity to buy from you and spend what you want to charge, right? So, so we help them really define their ideal customer profile, and then help them define their buyer personas. And I think this is where the big gap that I see. How can you help extract value if you don't understand what the customer's goals and objectives are, and ultimately what they value? And this is where there's a misalignment in the sales profession.
I think those words could have come out of my mouth. Thank you. I think that's spot on. Let's jump back though. How do you help people figure out what their ICP is? Do you have an exercise that you do? You just twist their arms?
There's a couple of ways. Obviously, like depending if they're happy, if they're saying, look, this is the customer set that we want to talk to. These are the people that are buying from us. We just need more of them buying from us. Great. Let's have a look at the characteristics that make up the attributes that make up these people. Let's pull, 20, 30 of your customers. Let's actually find out which sector they're sitting within. Is it financial services? Is it insurance? Is it tech? And let's then start to really categorize what they look like. If you're a business that's saying, you know what, these are the customers that I'm currently working with, but I don't want to work with them moving forward. They're low yield, they're high touch, they're too much, they just don't see value in what we offer, and they're always trying to screw us down on price, right? We have to make that shift from SMB to mid-market. Okay, let's have a look at what that mid-market profile looks like. And then how does your product suit that mid-market, customer? So they're the two key steps that we go through. Again, companies that are happy with their customer base, they just don't have enough customers. And often what they do is they've got one message for everyone. So they've got the same message for an accountant that they might be selling to, and a manufacturing business, when fundamentally those businesses behave very differently. They've got different needs. Their goals and objectives are different, right? Their challenges and their trends are different. So they should segment them and then start to think about the message that resonates for the industry sector that they're dealing with.
Yeah, so that launches us right back to the concept of value. And how is it that you help companies figure out what their customers actually value? Because I have to say, if there's one problem that I see pretty generically in every company I deal with, it's that they don't think about value from their customer's perspective. They think about it from their own perspective.
Yeah, I said that all the time. I trained a bunch of incredibly young, good sellers yesterday from a very large CRM and marketing automation company. And they're selling into the SMB market, sort of 1 to 10 mil revenue. Most of them are business owners. And that was a question I asked. I said, what are the KPIs that drive this person, that drive this buyer? And they were talking about sort of, marketing campaigns and features. And I said, guys, from a small business, 1 to 10 mil, he's worried about how much revenue, what's my cost to run my business, how much operating cash flow do I need to have to ensure I'm not, going too low, and how much profit am I making? Like, that's fundamentally the things that matter to him or her, right?
Yep.
And again, I see this like yourself. Most people don't know this. Most people don't go deep enough to understand those KPIs, those key objectives. And again, a small, medium business, very different to a mid-market to enterprise. Mid-market to enterprise, they're not worried about the tax bill. They're not worried about, it depends. If you're a CFO, they might worry about it, but they're not worrying about operating cash flow, etc. But an SMB who's putting his own hand in his pocket to cover some of the expenses, or pulling out money to pay for his, kids' school fees, etc., They're very different needs and wants, so they value things differently, right? And again, this is where what we do with organizations, we even bring their personas, their customers into the sessions so they can interview them, and we ask them questions so they can really learn what's important to the buyer and what they value, because it changes. It's a bit of a paradigm shift for the seller. It's like, oh, shit, I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's what's important to him. I didn't know that these are 3 KPIs that matters the most. Because if you don't know that, then fundamentally, what are you presenting to them? You're just selling stuff that you think is important to them, and it might completely miss the mark. Then you wonder why you're stuck in a battle of price.
Okay, one of my more embarrassing stories. I was a salesperson for a few years. I was a horrible salesperson. I'll assure you of that. And I remember I would go list features that my product has and look at the person's eyes, hoping that you'd see some gleam of interest in some feature that I listed. And so now that I look back at that in retrospect, first off, no wonder I was horrible. But secondly, if you think about it, if I was talking to an expert, I could probably do that. I could list features and they could say, yep, I got it. Here's how that makes me more money.
Yeah.
But how many of our buyers are truly experts?
Yeah. Well, they're not.
Right. And so now we have to have the conversation of how do we help you make more profit? Right.
And it's not that they're not experts, but there are things that our buyers do, how they make money, versus there are things that we do that can help them fix a problem or achieve an improved result. And remember, they're the 2 things that really matter. When we're selling anything, we're either helping them achieve a better result, or we're helping them fix a problem that helps them achieve a better result, right? Or it's de-risking something within the business that could essentially stop them from achieving a particular result. Anything outside of that, it doesn't become a priority. And we know that the biggest competitor a seller or a company selling a product or service is competing with is not the competitor, it's the status quo, right? It's doing nothing. And if a company, for example, didn't have to pay you, Mark, if they could find a way to get the outcome that you help them achieve without paying you, they'd probably they'll do it.
Sure.
Right? But the reality is there's a gap. That's why they pay people like me and you to help them, because they recognize there's a gap, or we help them recognize there's a gap, and we show them there's a better way. But ultimately, companies don't want to buy more tech. Companies don't want to buy more, stuff. Like, they're only buying it because they need it.
Can I say,
a perceived need?
I feel like I'm talking to myself. So I created a concept a little while ago. I call it a value table, and you'll love this, I think. But what a value table essentially is let's start with what's a marketable product feature. So what's a feature that you love to talk about with your product?
Yeah.
Why'd you build it? What problem does it solve for who? If someone solves that problem with your feature, what result might they get? And then the last table is what's the dollar value of that result? Right? In B2B sales, we can use our business acumen and figure out what that dollar value is to our customers.
Yeah.
And you said those exact words. It's like, oh, I love this conversation.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I find that sellers do not to extract enough value from the equation, right, is I talk to a customer or a prospect, and as a seller, I have no patience. And the minute you say, this is a problem, as a seller, I go into, well, this is how we can help you, right? And I'm only addressing one problem, but the reality is derived value. I'm a big believer in derived value, in that there's a problem here. Where else does that impact? Which other department? How does it impact that person? Supply chain, distribution, whatever it might be. Then all of a sudden, you can derive and go, well, actually, this particular problem, the root cause is happening down here. It's happening now, it's impacting 6 areas of the business. And if we fix it, we're not actually just saving you $10 in your department, we're saving $100 across all 6 departments. Now, all of a sudden, that value equation is far greater than what it was before. Then we have a real compelling reason for the customer to think about change. And the business case is much more significant than what it was if you just responded to the first need that you hear.
Yep.
And again, that's because sellers have, like, they just, and this is not a bad thing. It's actually hard to hold back. It's hard to not respond. It's hard to say, you know, I'm here because I've got to sell to this guy or sell to this female. It's actually, we're not the hero. We're just a byproduct of the outcome we're helping the person achieve. We've got to continue to remember that we are not the heroes in the conversation.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We have to help our client be the hero, essentially, as we do that. So how do you help clients find that value piece?
So again, I go back to the persona and really get them thinking about the persona and what's important to the persona. And if we can say, hey, these are the 3 or 4 things that matter to them, then everything from a narrative perspective, our messaging needs to be focused on that.
But let me pause you for just a second. I'm with you. I agree. But earlier when I asked the question, you said everybody wants to increase profit, reduce costs, increase revenue, lower risk, right? So these are the generic. Every CFO, CEO in the world wants to do these things, right?
Yeah.
So if I walk into a company and I say, do you want me to help you increase profit? They're like, get out of here, right?
Yeah.
So there's an intermediate step of we've got to recognize where the value is going to come from.
And that's where, if I'm prospecting, for example, Mark, I'd be looking for a reason to connect what I do to what they do. So there's got to be some form. I can't just ring up a CEO or a CFO and say, hey, Mark, I think there's a way for you to make more profit and drop down your cost, right? So you can pull more money out each month. They'd be like, sorry, what's this about, right? It's about saying, hey, Mark, I've noticed that you guys are advertising in this region and it's actually new for you guys. So that's telling me that you're looking to grow your business. And I think there's a way for you to do that and also strip out 15 to 20% of your marketing cost so that you can achieve a higher profit. Do you mind me asking, what's triggered you guys to start marketing in this new area? So what you do is you use a trigger event, you use something, a level of personalization, a level of relevance. And again, not enough sellers do this because it takes a bit more time, right? Or you see something in the news, you might say, I do this with CMOs, banks, large organizations, they're raising capital. And you use that to connect to the reason why you're calling. And it gives context, yeah? So he's saying, I've read your financial report. You've mentioned that you're moving away from a licensing-based pricing model to a subscription-based pricing model, right? And you've made mention of that to your shareholders. And I think there's a way for you to do that, accelerate that objective so that you can meet shareholders' demands, also in a way that doesn't require you to spend a whole bucket on marketing to get that message to the market. Very different value narrative, because the way in which we open kind of sets up the next stage of the process. And if I open with feature, right, the problem is there's only a certain portion of the market at any given time that's thinking about change, right? Or that's thinking about buying what we're selling at that point in time. Now, if I do happen to lead with feature, hey, Mark, we help customers, with pricing issues. Oh, actually, we've just been talking about that. Great. If I do happen to get a small percentage of the market, very small window, that say, yes, let's talk. The problem is we're going to be talking about the features and the product, right? We're going to be talking about that particular conversation thread, right? Instead of, okay, let's think about the bigger impact here. Let's think about what are we trying to achieve as an organization, the future state, the business outcomes, the commercial value that you can help them achieve. Because again, your pricing conversation is not what they're buying. They're buying the outcome that your pricing conversation allows them to achieve. And that starts at the very first level of interaction that we have with someone. Because otherwise what happens is at some point they're going to go, well, okay, we've got Mark, let's go get somebody else to give us a price. And then all of a sudden you're in the realm of a spreadsheet or, comparison going, they all do the same thing. How do you differentiate that? Right. And I've got a really interesting story. I was interviewing a chief procurement officer for a very large waste management organization across Asia for one of the clients, a project that we're doing. And the CPO said, we've just embarked on a process of implementing a platform called Areeba. It's like a huge procurement SAP product. And he said, we have to use an integrator. And usually these integrations are hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he goes, we went to the market, we got 3 integrators to give us a price. We knocked one off straight away because they just weren't fit to purpose. And we had 2. He goes, interesting, one was 50% higher than the other. But we chose the more expensive provider. And the salespeople were like gobsmacked. They're like, well, why? He goes, well, actually, because the one that offered a more expensive product actually learned from us that we are a very reactive company. And when we've done projects of this nature before, we always go off scope, and it impacted the deliverables and time blew out. So what they did is they factored in extra resources to ensure that if it did happen, they would have the resources to keep them on scope and make sure they deliver by the time required. And he says, and as a CPO, what's important for me is managing risk and procuring a strategic outcome. So that one vendor took the time to really understand how they behaved in the past, which dictates how they behave in the future. The other just thought, let's just go low on price to win this deal.
Yep.
Right? So it's interesting that the buyer actually went with the more expensive option.
Yeah, I think what happens, not only in this case, but in similar cases, is if you're the salesperson who helps the company learn what they really need to do, how they're going to go solve their problems.
Yeah.
You've built the relationship and the trust that even if they go out for bid, you've got the big advantage there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love what you just said there, right? Because there's different types of needs when we engage with a customer. There's the obvious need, there's the emerging need, there's the unrecognized need. And when we're actually able to deal with a prospect or a customer or whoever and help them identify an unrecognized need, we're actually creating value. Yep. And if we do that in the sales process before they've even bought from us, and they're talking to other people, and we're the ones that help them recognize something they hadn't considered first, we've created value. And they're having a conversation in the boardroom going, hang on, Luigi mentioned this, and we haven't considered this, guys. Like, what are we going to do to work through this? Now they're seeing me as that level of expert, the expert, the person that can help them through this. Yep. That's value, right?
Absolutely.
That in there is value.
Absolutely right. Before we wrap this up, though, I want to ask, we brought up RFPs. Yep. My personal attitude towards an RFP for my business, I never bid on an RFP. Absolutely never. I coach clients often to not do that, but sometimes they have to. Sometimes it's the industry and you have no choice. But if I wasn't involved in helping write the RFP and helping create it, I've got close to 0% chance of winning it. And I just don't have a desire to waste my time.
Well, it's one of those interesting things. If I'm getting the RFP, they're inviting me and I had no clue about it, I'm too late to the table. And again, one more story. I think you'll like this. One of Australia's largest retailers, they built this incredible new distribution center. And as they were building, they had to get this, all the racking, all the automated racking stuff. Now, I was coaching the sales leader from a racking company, and he was talking about this opportunity. And I said, because the RFP is coming out in 6 months. I said, okay. And what do you know about it? When we did some deep dive, his competitor was already working with them in a pre-sale, helping them do their plans to put into the RFP, right? Now, the challenge that presented him was he ain't building that plan to be he would have probably made it very specific to how they could answer and how they could deliver. He was too late. He didn't win that deal. And the probability was he was already never going to win that deal.
Yep.
Right. And I'm in the same camp as you. Like, again, if I get pulled in, if I have to, but then I'll try to reposition things. I'll try to find out something, get myself in there. I've got to be, otherwise I'm just going through a process of building an RFP, which is just waste my time for nothing. Right.
Yeah. And the other thing, just to beat up RFPs a little bit more, if you think about what an RFP really is, it's a customer who said, I have a problem. If I were going to solve this, let me design the solution to it. And then they write that on a piece of paper and they send that as an RFP. Now, how many of our customers could do as good a job as we could do at designing the solution to their problem?
The thing is, they don't. If they did, they'd fix it themselves. Right? It's like going, I need a tech platform. I'm going to tell these tech platforms that spend billions of dollars a year on technology, but because I spend $100,000 a year, I know what's best for my business. I'll go to the doctor. I'll get cancer. I'll go to the doctor. I'll say, hey, doctor, this is how you treat me. Right?
I've put together my treatment plan. Here's what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. You've done 10 years of education, but don't worry. I did a bit of research on Google.
Right. All right, Luigi, we're going to have to wrap this up, but I'm going to ask you the final question I ask everybody. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Before even going to a point of price and advocating any solutions, ask yourself a question. Do you know the problem they're trying to solve? Do you know the impact that problem will help them achieve? And do you know the outcome that they're looking to achieve? If you can't answer those three questions, you're pricing too early and it's completely irrelevant.
Nice. So I'm going to take what you just said and say, sell value before giving price.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Luigi, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. Luigi Prestinenzi. There's not many of me on LinkedIn, and also salesiqglobal.com. We have a whole bunch of resources. We've got 4 podcasts, releasing a 5th podcast, all around kind of how to drive sales, revenue engine, etc. So that's the best places to find us and to find me.
Nice, nice. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So thank you very much. I really did feel like I was talking to myself. So that was good.
Thanks for having me on the show, Mark.
It's my pleasure. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review on whatever your favorite podcast download site is? And if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.